Tonight, we're excited to welcome Chuck Israels. From his upbringing among some of the leading lights of American music and left politics, to his legendary work as bassist for the Bill Evans Trio, to his collaborations with such figures as Charles Mingus and Billie Holiday, Chuck Israels has witnessed over a half century of change and innovation in American jazz. In Bass Notes, he offers up an engaging memoir and a meditation on the history of jazz music and its prospects for the future. In addition to the fascinating stories from his work with musicians like John Coltrane, Stan Getz, Herbie Hancock, and Joan Baez, he gives an inside view into the mysterious alchemy that happens when skilled improvisers get together. He also explores the importance of jazz in the American music canon and shines light on the obstacles that young jazz musicians face today, following the giants of earlier generations and the dwindling opportunities to make a living. Bass Notes is a book that highlights a fascinating life in music and argues that jazz's rich legacy will not be lost in the years to come. Israels will be joined in conversation by Schornstein, attorney at law specializing in intellectual law, entertainment law, contracts, and music copyrights. We thank him for being part of tonight's event. Tonight's event also includes an audience Q&A, so start thinking of some questions for that. And then after that, Chuck will be up here at the table to sign books for you. There are some books on the cart back there. If you didn't get one, there's a few of them that are already signed, so if you're in a rush, you can grab a signed one and take off. Pay for the books downstairs on your way out of the store. And a reminder that we do close at 8:55. All right, now please welcome Chuck Israels and Jay Schornstein.
Okay, good evening. So let's start with some definitions. Jazz listeners know what jazz music is when they hear it, but how would you describe it?
You asked me this earlier today, and I told you I was going to have trouble. It's the music that comes from Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker, and if you can hear Louis Armstrong and Charlie Parker in the music, then it's jazz, and if you can't, then it's not.
Further to jazz music, some have opined that it is America's classical music. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's one of America's classical musics, and I think it's a fortunate fusion that happened as all genuine good fusions happen without any, what's the word? Without any calculation. West Africans were brought here. They had their lives and their culture, and they were exposed to European culture. European people were exposed to West Africans, even though the society was trying to keep them apart. The cultures mixed, and that is American culture.
Right.
And people sometimes call our music Afro-American music, and I disagree with that definition because I don't think there's any American music without African influence. I don't think you can, if it doesn't have any African influence, it was European music. So it's American music. And is it all American music? No. Is it all American classical music? No. But it's the best, probably the best thing that we, along with modern dance, it's the thing that identifies our world contribution to culture.
Well, how did you get into jazz and playing bass? How did that come about? What influences did you have as a young person?
Well, it's in the book.
How did you know it was legendary? Precursor.
Well, that's, you know, I wrote the book so people should know, but because it was interesting. I grew up in a family where my stepfather was a classical baritone, very good musician, very smart man, whose best friends were Paul Robeson, Pete Seeger, Mark Schornstein, Norman Delajoyo, that's a name you may not know, good composer. Ali Siegmeister, another composer. But New York intellectual musicians and actors and composers, and I grew up in a household I was surrounded by people like that, and as a kid there were other circumstances that my parents created that put me in contact with young people that were very gifted and working hard at being musicians, and I was kind of scared by all of that. I didn't think I was going to be a musician. Those people are gifted and talented, and I can sort of do a few things, but I better go to MIT and be an engineer.
Yeah, but going back earlier, what was the first instrument that you played, and how old were you?
Probably, well, I had piano lessons when I was too young to, but my parents did the right thing, give piano lessons, there's nothing wrong with that, except it didn't work. It should have, I wish it had. I was probably too young, and for whatever reason, I hardly remember it, but I played the ukulele first. I think it was the simplest, you know, you pick that thing up, anybody can play that almost. There's nothing to it. And I got interested in chords and harmony and singing silly songs the way every kid does. They were child songs. And I was good enough at that. But the people around me were great musicians, so it was a little scary. And I got to be a bass player. That's also a long story, also in the book, but partly because it was fairly easy. And my life has been full of finding the path of least resistance.
Well, if I can break in,
But that doesn't mean I haven't worked on anything, but a lot of my life.
right. Well, that was a theme that I, saw prevalent through your book. Two themes, personal themes.
Yeah.
One was insecurity,
Yeah.
and the other was everything comes easy to me. Playing music and doing things. And this is what you're talking about. So, do you still have these characteristics? Or, how did this influence you?
Do I still have that? Oh yeah, I think the character that you are happens to you in your, not exactly in your infancy, in kind of preschool, and when you're 3 and 4 years old, you get imprinted with certain kinds of character from your, partly from genetics and partly from your environment. I don't mean that nobody changes after that, but there's some central part of you that's already there. And I think I've adapted. I've learned to work on things. It took me a long time to discover the possibility of practice or repeated attention at something and to get better at it. A lot of the time I did things that were easy. It was at first really kind of easy to write this book. If it hadn't been easy, I wouldn't have done it. I'm a good writer. I don't know. Why am I a good writer? Because my mother was a good editor and taught me how to be a good writer. And I've been interested in being literate and verbally fluent. He says stumblingly. So, yeah, it was easy to write the book, but then getting it into shape to be a book, that wasn't easy. But it was worth it. So if I see a pathway to something that looks as if it might be worth it, and I think maybe I can do it, then I will stick with it. But I'm insecure and afraid, like everybody else. And
Well, I've you know, with many musicians that I've met, they've all expressed this sense of insecurity. And it seems to me it's a propelling force in one's development of their musical abilities.
I guess. I don't know. One of the things I say, I mean, I'm not afraid of saying that I have insecurities. I'm terribly afraid of showing it in my music. I don't think it belongs in my music, and I tell that to students. You can express all these different things in music, passion and even aggression and tenderness beyond your normal daily social interactions. You can kind of represent it in symbolic ways in music, but nobody wants you to be insecure in your musical performance. They don't, makes them uncomfortable. So I'll tell you I'm insecure, but when I'm playing, I don't want you to know it. And I'm not really insecure in most of the playing circumstances that I find myself in now. Maybe because I stay in my lane.
In your early professional days, when you started playing, you know, with many of the known players, did you have that sense of insecurity, or had you kind of overcome
I guess I did, but you don't have time when you're playing. You can walk in the room and you can be insecure, you pick up the bass and it's time to play, and you don't have any time for that. You cannot allow that to enter your, actually there's a story in the book about how I heard myself be insecure in a recording session and immediately put a stop to it. Because, well, for kind of obvious reasons. But in general, you're too busy for those kinds of emotions to come through. You're busy with with activity. It's pretty hard to be insecure when you're that busy,
Right.
or to experience your insecurity.
When you were in New York and recording and playing with folks, when you reflect back on it, what were some of your most enjoyable clubs that you played at, personnel that you played with, besides Bill Evans?
I had a nice recording session with Herbie Hancock at Rudy Van Gilder's studio with a lot of good musicians, Donald Byrd, Hank Mobley, Tony Williams, Graham Greene. Who else was on it anyway? Gracie Monk, trombone player, not very well. It was a septet record. JJ. I loved being with JJ Johnson, who was an elegant, gracious, real interesting gentleman of a person, always good to work with. Barry Harris, I had a close, loving relationship with Barry, as did many people. He was a guy who, I mean, to say I love Barry, I sure, so did everybody else, because that was who he was. Those are some of the people that I think of. I have a couple of guitar player friends that I really have enjoyed musical relationships with one guy who's not known at all, who lives in Ithaca, New York, and with Dan, family here.
So in your book, if I can just get this quote here, you mentioned playing with Bill Evans that you had a certain type of rapport with Bill that you didn't find frequently with many other musicians. And could you describe what that rapport was like? Was it a personal rapport? Was it a musical rapport?
Not personal, because I think Bill was, Chris was here, who knew him a lot better than I did, even though I was playing with him. Bill, I kept myself apart from Bill because I was afraid of his addiction. He was a heroin addict, and it confused the hell out of me. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't understand that most of the time he wasn't in kind of some zombie high mental state. He was just maintained. I understand that now. Had I had a better perspective of that, I would have been a lot closer with him in terms of socially. We probably would have been friends. He said at some point that I was a hard person to get to know. I don't think that that's true at all. I was a hard person for him to get to know because I didn't let him. And that was a loss. But it was what I understood at the time, and if I could go back and change it, I would, but I can't.
And several years ago, you wrote an essay about Bill Evans' music, and it was very, my reading of it was very, very complex with many musical terms and definitions describing how he played and how he did what he did. For a non-musician, how would you describe what you put in that essay, if it's possible?
Well, Bill's playing had an emotional scope that was broader than most jazz musicians. He had all of the rhythmic propulsion and energy and things that make your body feel active that attracted me to jazz in the first place. It makes my body feel active in a particular way. It's active in a syncopated, varied way. It's not active the way square dancing is active, or the way hip hop dancing is active, where everything is, or marching is active, where everything is on the downbeats. The activity is spread out and varied in a way, and the rhythms make me feel very kind of light, and I enjoy that feeling. Of course, what's happening is sound is going into my ears. What has it got to do with my body? That's the abstract language that speaks to me in that way. And Bill's music was particularly engaging in that respect, and in the fact that it wasn't, that it had dynamic nuances. That's technical. In other words, it wasn't all loud. A lot of now popular music all sounds like this to me. And Bill's music had a range of expression that seemed to embrace the kind of language the kind of musical possibilities that I heard in Chopin and Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, and, well, not so much Beethoven, because there wasn't very much bombastic in Bill's music. But there was a broad enough range that you could go from one piece to another, to another, to another, and through a set of music or two sets, you could have a variety of experiences that kept things fresh. I haven't found that in very many jazz circumstances. Ellington's music, of course, has that, but not very many.
With other noted musicians who you perform with, did you ever have that same, feeling?
No, and probably because I did not take the opportunity to go with Ellington when Joe Benjamin called me up and said he had to get off the road, and would I take over for him for a while. I don't remember when that happened. I don't know if we had just been married or what. I can't put it into chronological spot in my memory, but I know I was not prepared to go on the road with Ellington's band, so I missed that opportunity, and that, of course, is as expansive and broad and musically engaging as any other jazz musicians. I never experienced it personally.
Well, you mentioned in your book playing with Jim Hall, and you've
Always
said
good.
you felt that same compatibility
And
and
lately,
sensitivity.
I went to Israel, maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's been quite a while now. I was going to Europe to do something, and I had a fan letter from a pianist, Alec Katz. And I just preceded the trip to Europe, and this is a guy who lives in Tel Aviv. And I wrote him back, and I also had a guitar player friend who had gone to school with Alec, and who said, "Oh, you like this guy." So I'd never been to Israel, and I was curious. I wanted to see the country, and would he find some, if you're a big fan, let's do some work together. And I showed up and picked up a borrowed bass, and there was a great drummer in Alex, and we started playing. It was, wow. Here is a guy who puts things together and goes from one idea to the next, and it grows, and it has the kind of development and shapeliness about the progression of events that has some kind of parallel with Bill's. Besides, it speaks the bebop language, which is the language I speak. And I immediately felt a kinship with this guy, and it's because of how he develops musical form. And that's something that engages me when it's done a certain way. And how does it work? Somebody establishes expectation, and then in approximately 60-40 or 2/3, 1/3 relationship spoils that expectation. And that's the way things work. That's the way dramas work. That's the way any kind of art that takes place over time works. It's pretty simple. And it's also pretty simple for me, from my perspective, that is such an absolute given to me that there are certain things that I can hear and reject, things that don't have that are automatically not worth my time, and that in fact interfere with my appreciation for musical things. I don't want to hear Philip Glass's music. It's particularly designed not to do, on purpose, it's designed not to do those things that engage me. So I don't care. people will do the acoustic equivalent of looking at wallpaper for an hour. I don't know. Not for me.
I assume that you incorporate this in your composing.
As best I can, sure.
In terms of composing, do you do mostly arrangements or new tunes?
Lately, I've been doing a lot of arrangements. I remember my mother asking me, how did she put it? Is it your composition or just an arrangement? We have 2 daughters. One of them's adopted. I don't care. Doesn't make me any difference. So my feeling about my arrangements is they have my stamp. And there is a degree of overlap. When you're composing, you're busy arranging the little ideas you started with. When you're arranging, you're busy recomposing some little ideas someone else started with, or maybe a bigger idea. Maybe you have to accept more of. But I have a great time interpreting. Oh, this is Irving Berlin's song, and this is the way I hear it. And there's a lot of room for that in the way American music is interpreted.
In your book, you describe an encounter with Paul Overton in terms of the Monk Town Hall concert, and you were very impressed with how he was doing the arrangements, and he mentored you.
Oh, he was my teacher. He was my composition.
So what did he teach you?
Repetition, sequence, inversion, retrograde inversion, retrograde, augmentation, diminution in both the pitch and time dimensions, rhythmic displacement, a list like that. That was it. That's what he taught me. However, he taught me how to use them. I mean, he taught me by example. And often I would go and I would be working on something and come to an impasse of one kind or another, and he would solve the problem for me using these techniques. And I would hate the result. I did not like what came out of Hall's pencil. But I would go home and use the same technique that he had and come up with results that I liked. And those things, while they are on some level simple, and they are, as are most important things, kind of basically simple, knowing how to use them and make the best of them is a question of practice and awareness that you only get after you use them a lot. I was quick to pick them up, and those are the things that I showed Paul Simon when he was in trouble, and for which he was grateful, and that he learned in a flash and was able to apply it into his own work in, I guess, successful ways, because certainly was successful.
How did you meet him?
One summer, he rented a big house almost directly across the road from where my parents had their music summer arts camp, 1967 or 68. And by then by that time I left Bill, and I was probably studying with Hall, and I was helping my folks out for the summer, and also probably a little irritated at being kind of in their thrall 24/7 for 8 weeks. So I knew that this guy was across the street, and I knew musicians who had worked with him. And so I just went over and rang the doorbell. Hi, I'm Chuck. I know Bob James and Stu Sharf. And oh, come on in. It was as simple as that. And I spent some hours with him over the summer, and then at some point when he was having trouble looking for someone to help him, Phil Ramone, the producer engineer, said, well, Bob James or Chuck, they booked him. And he called me, and that was that. I made some money, had a good time with him, nice person. And then he offered me points, and when the record was done, I should have said, he said, did he owe me points? I think that's what he, I didn't just offer them, did he owe me? And I said, no, because he didn't. He said, well, the music's different. I said, yeah, but I didn't write it. You wrote it. I passed on information to you that you paid me for, and what I should have said is, no, you don't owe me, but it would be really nice if you give me with it. If.
Who are your mentors learning the bass?
A young guy named Bill Ryan, who was a student at, I thought he was at camp, who was a year or two younger than I was, and already a virtuoso bass player at 15 or 16, who later became associate principal at the Boston Symphony, and a bass player in Boston, after whom I modeled my posture and physical approach to the bass, a guy named John Neves. Those were the first ones, and then when I heard Red Mitchell and Jim Hall, shortly after, that was about 1955, I think he was playing with, I think they were playing together with Hampton Hawes in Storyville. And I heard how this percussive string instrument that had percussive qualities that I liked could also be made to sound vocal. Both of those guys, they had the same approach. Basically, they don't pick every note. And that, I heard that, I think my playing changed instantly. I wanted to make my playing not sound like a typewriter. And so, as a soloist, Red Mitchell has been just absolutely the pinnacle of and I will never play anything as beautiful as he did. In terms of rhythmic approach and playing in ensembles, I think there was something in the zeitgeist that just, I don't know who influenced it, but Scott LaFaro and Charlie Hayden and I, and a guy named Albert Stinson and a few others had this way of incorporating the rhythmic pulse of the guys that preceded us. Like we used to listen to Percy Heath and Paul Chambers, who was almost a contemporary, and Ray Brown, and people like that, Oscar Pettiford, who was a big influence, among many others. And we had a way of listening to that and thinking, somehow, nobody ever decided this, but somehow we weren't always playing quarter notes. we were still playing musical pulsation, and it fit in the music, it interlaced in different ways. It wasn't always here, 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 and here. It was sometimes in between. And I don't know who invented it. I was among the people who started to play that way. And I will tell Diane the story of, it's in the book, but it is kind of incomplete in the book. Bill had gone to Shelley's Manhole. This was before your time, right? He was married to Rosie.
Right.
And Bill was playing there with Red. I don't know if I knew he was playing with Red. I must have known. Red was such a hero to me, I couldn't imagine why this happened, but I got to Denver with another band. I thought, okay, I'm halfway across the country, Bill is there, I'll call him and see if he wants me to fly from Denver to LA and join him. And I called him at the club and he said, yes, please come, I'll send you the money. And why he preferred playing with me to playing with this incredible musician that was head and shoulders better than I was in so many ways, I can't really tell you, except maybe our different approach to accompaniment. It's the only thing I can put my finger on, because Greg Mitchell solo, I wasn't knowing what I was going to do.
Did you ever have this discussion with Red?
No,
To see what his...
no. We went over to Red's house. He was a generous, easygoing guy, loving and friendly, and we were friends ever since. We were friends for the rest of his life. I would go out of my way to see him if I was in Europe and he was anywhere nearby. I would go to find him. When he moved to Salem, I visited you guys there.
And you did arrangements of his songs.
Right.
In Bellingham.
Right, and he left a bass. And his West Coast bass was in our house. So anyway, he was a big hero and I didn't quite understand it. But anyway, there was something about the different way we played in conjunction with Bill, that Bill preferred the way I did that. So I'm grateful that we found Larry Bunker, this great musician, drummer, and it was an incredible experience playing with those two guys, both of them, head and shoulders better musicians than I was. Now I feel as if I'm maybe up to the level that I deserved to be there. Obviously, I deserve to be there, or I wouldn't have been there, but I know so much more now and feel as if I have much more control over what I'm doing.
Right, in your book, you describe certain gigs that you had, and one that I thought was very interesting was when you went to Thailand.
Yeah.
Could you extrapolate on that? And then my follow-up question is, what was the worst gig that you've ever had?
Well, two of them, there are two worst gigs. One of them, there's a whole story about it in the book. When you read the book, there's some of it that's in another typeface. That's a whole story about a terrible gig, a terrible one-night gig in Stamford, Connecticut. It was just a disastrous evening, and funny in its the way awful things can sometimes be funny. And it's the only part of the book that I wrote at the moment that it happened. The terrible gig, the other terrible one was when Bill had to make money, and we worked opposite the Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem, which is that's an Irish folk group. I suppose they're okay, they're pretty good, but their audience and our audience were at complete odds, and their audience was larger, and it was a terrible uphill battle. It's the only time I ever played with Bill that I didn't feel any connection at all, and it was a week-long torture session. It was pretty horrible. But with Stan, I was working with Bill. Then suddenly I wasn't working with Bill. No ceremony. Gary Peacock was making a record with Bill, and I wasn't there. No explanation. I don't know if you know anything about this, Chris.
I was too young. I didn't know where that album came from. And my
I have
mother
a
even said she
feeling that
didn't
there
like
were
it.
superficial things about Gary Peacock's playing that might have reminded Bill of Scott. He had fast chops. He was kind of a virtuoso player. I didn't like it all that much, but I was certainly impressed with it. And I thought, okay, I had my year or two with Bill, and now I'm not, but there's so much work. Okay, and I went to work with Stan Getz. And also in the book is a lot about how I shot myself in the foot with that by hiring. I thought I was going to be Stan Getz's music director. He always had people working with him who organized the music. He had no idea how to organize music. Brilliant guy that he was, brilliant player. It was either Jimmy Rainey or Bob Brookmeyer or somebody in the band was the music director while Stan was this great soloist. And I thought, oh, I'm going to learn to do that at Stan's expense. And then I hired somebody who was way better prepared to do that than I was. I helped Stan find Gary Burton, who was a very good musician. So I worked with them for a little while, and then Bill called and said, will you come back? And I said, okay, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. It was okay playing with Stan, but he was a complicated person, and there wasn't the amount of room in the band, even though Stan was making it clear that he valued me in some way. Not with money, but nobody. Anyway, so I went back to work with Bill, and Stan was upset, and then he, I don't know, a year or two later, he had a call from, I can't remember the name of or somebody who was the social director for Lyndon Johnson's White House. That the King of Thailand wanted him. Johnson was going to a CETO, NATO and the Southeast Atlantic Treaty Organization meeting in Bangkok, and going to visit with the king, and the king asked for Stan Getz, and when that happens, you have to go. And they don't pay you. They treat you very well, but they don't pay you. And Stan had to give up work in order to do it. That also pissed him off. And I went, and the bass player who had taken my place, actually the second guy, Chichudo and Steve Swallow, he had the flu. And Helen, his wife, said, no, you can't go. Well, the fact is, you have the flu, it doesn't hurt you to. It doesn't, you can go, you can work. Might get other people infected, but he could have gone. But Helen said no. And Stan had to have somebody quickly. Gary, what do we do? And Gary called Chuck. He knows the music. Stan wouldn't call me. He was afraid of, I don't know what. So I went on this trip. I was happy to go. I'd never been to, it's the only time I've been to Asia, except across the bridge in Istanbul. But the only time I've set foot in, no, that's not true. I've been to Japan. But anyway, it was the first trip.
Did you play with the king? Did you play with the king?
Yeah,
He was a great
So-
clarinetist.
yeah, he was okay. He played alto saxophone and clarinet. He was a very nice man. He treated us extraordinarily well. Stan was a mess, for whatever reasons. Talk about insecurity, he was a terrible mess. And it was what should have been a fantasy great trip was difficult because of Stan's behavior. Got drunk and insulted President Johnson. It's and I don't know, it was 1966, I don't remember it that well. I remember the name of one of the ladies in waiting. It was such a nice name. She was nice, British educated, Thai, Palm Suchiriko. Why I remember that name, just the sound of it. I don't remember all that much from it though. If I went back to Bangkok, I would know where I was or anything. But we were at the palace, and we were fed at the palace, and we went to a house outside that was built for entertainment. That was outside, and we were there were a lot of nice things about it. And Stan was a mess the whole time, for whatever reasons. But that's that story.
Okay. Well, shall we open it up to the audience?
Yeah, sure.
Any questions? Anybody?
Hi, I heard you on TV this morning.
Yeah.
Talking about Portland's jazz scene. Tell me please, where do you play in Portland, and do you go out to hear live jazz?
I don't play here very much. There isn't, George, where's George? George is working all the time. I came to Portland in 2010, almost 14 years ago. And Warren Rand, who was a saxophone player here at that point, said, "Oh, you're going to get all the work." And I said, "Warren, I didn't come here to take work away from the local bass players. I came to create work of my own. I wanted to organize my own music." And I did for a while. I had a octet nonet that had a life for quite a few years that was, I think, was pretty good. It got very hard to maintain it. I think we probably net lost money. We would give a concert at, usually at Classic Pianos. They charge $150 for the venue. It was not even as comfortable chairs as these are, good pianos. And we'd give an hour and a quarter, hour and a half concert and collect enough money to pay the musicians maybe $100 each, for which they had given 1 or 2 rehearsals plus the evening, afternoon, and it was so underpaid, it was ridiculous. And I never took any money from it because I couldn't imagine how I could it was a joy for me to have my music played and to have an audience listen to it and have that experience, but there was no money. Nobody would. People don't pay for music here. And now, I don't know if I'd have the energy to do that again. I need a lot of help. Because besides writing all the music and rehearsing it and everything, you've got to do all the other work that you have to find a place and figure that. Anyway, there's more than I am willing to take on at this moment, even though I miss playing. And some of the guys that I used to rely on are going. Charlie Porter, who was an extraordinary trumpet player, is back in New York. He may come back. His wife is from Eugene. They talk about maybe coming back here. That would be a big help. There are a lot of good players, but there isn't a good band. I'm sorry, with all the good players, there isn't a good band because people play one night and not weeks at a time together. the same material. If you look at the videos of, or hear recordings of Bill, there's a new recording out that, what's it called?
Tails.
What?
Tails.
Tales, right, from a performance at the Radio House in Copenhagen in 1964, and it's really good. Well, why does it sound so good? Because we were playing the same material night after night after night to the point where the material was transparent and our performance was spontaneous in the way a good, what Red used to say, nothing so well prepared as a good spontaneous performance. And I haven't had that. I haven't had that experience since playing with Bill. That experience of playing the same material. It wasn't in the same order. Something would drop out and a new piece would come in, so it wasn't boring. I don't want to be misinterpreted. This was not a boring experience at all. This was an experience of reliability. So I haven't matched that. That was a long time, 1966. I haven't had any experiences quite like that, although now and then something happens where something gels for a moment and you wish you could hang on to that and do it again, and it's over. So the world has changed, and that is a big part of my concern and some of the things I've written about in the book, that the environment that grew this music that I thought was normal, because it was normal in my lifetime, that I watched change starting around 1968 or something like that, it was not at all normal. This is normal. Garbage popular music is normal in the history of the world. I think I grew up in an extraordinarily abnormal situation in which popular music was created by and consumed by educated people. And that started around sort of towards the end of the 19th century with, maybe even in the middle of it with Stephen Foster and Sousa, and then the New Orleans people, Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton, and Louis Armstrong, who was really a popular musician, had this creative instinct for growing it and creating something else out of it. And all of that lasted until the baby boom generation reached adolescence and took over again, and we got back to normal. And one of the things I said this morning, did you hear what I said about KMHD?
I did. Thank you.
Jazz Without Borders, what is that? They make a big thing of it as if it's some positive idea.
Right.
And I don't know, I can see in the abstract the idea of having something open. Well, that's nice. In principle, it has some attractive aspects to it. But you don't want a country without borders. You want people to be able to go through those borders legally, but you speak French on this side and Spanish on this side and German over here and Italian over here, and there are reasons for those things being the way they are. And I turn on the radio, I don't listen to KMHD except in the car. And most of the time when I'm driving, it's the time when they have the worst music on, and it is so bad, I mean, it's just garbage. And People try to protect me from saying negative things. But I'm a music nutritionist. And I'm going to tell you that the equivalent of going out and eating a cheeseburger with fries and a beer 5 nights a week is not healthy. And listening to the music that's on television and on the radio and at the Super Bowl and every place else it's not healthy. It's doing something to your mind, the equivalent of what the garbage that we all know now not to eat all the time is doing to your body. And I'm standing by that. It's not good for you. Yes.
This might go into what you were just saying. In the book, you talk about Miles specifically, about kind of blue, the positive and negative of that legacy. But what I didn't get was, what about his later music, Bitches Brew and In a Silent Way and Big Fun? Do you have an opinion about those? I was really curious.
Yeah, I don't listen to it.
Okay. None of it?
No, none of it. No,
Okay.
because it doesn't have those qualities. It's not set up with the qualities of expectation and surprise.
Okay.
It's all surprise, which is the same, or it isn't designed well, and rhythmically it bores me. And I think Miles had his sense that he was entitled to more than he was getting, and I wished he had gotten it, because maybe he would not have turned. I don't know. Okay. The idea of being an artist of your time, maybe it's important. I don't feel out of time, in spite of the fact that the popular music of now, or really since 1970, is not interesting enough to me to make me want to use it, or it doesn't give me anything. I don't feel that I'm out of my time, but maybe I am. I don't know. Miles felt whatever he felt. If I do that, I am off my time and I'm going to make a lot of money. He lost me, but he gained a lot of other people. Herbie Hancock, I worked with him. He has the aspect of his musical life that is this gifted guy, brilliant guy, does stuff that I don't care. On the other hand, if I had the ability to do that and make money, and the character to do that, if that were comfortable for me, why wouldn't I do it? Make some money. It just isn't comfortable for me. Paul Simon tried to make me money. I couldn't figure out how to do that. He was really trying to. Yes.
You mentioned with Bill's music that it had such a dynamic range of dynamics. Do you also find that with some, and that's why you prefer, I am inferring that's why you admire his music. Do you find that to also be true with something like Thelonious Monk?
Something like what?
You mentioned, you talked about
something like, what was the last?
With Thelonious Monk.
Oh, no, but, no, I really don't, but there is another design element in Monk's music that not every music has to have everything. And there are some qualities in Monk's music that I did not appreciate for a long time. This is also in the book. How I even when I was studying with Hall, I thought, oh, Monk, no, it's kind of a piano banger. Some people have told me, well, that was understandable. You were concentrating on learning a language that had certain refinements in it, and you were not able to take in this other stuff at the same time. Later on, I discovered that, in fact, this is simply great art made rough-hewn. And then when I taught people about Monk's music, I would say, imagine Michelangelo and the chisels and the abrasives and the marble and however you create this work. And there's a great sculptor with all these refinements. Now take that same person, put him in a field, chop down some logs, give him a chainsaw and some rope and what do you call those claw things? A big machine that picks up the logs. Forklift or something like that, yeah. And okay, can you make art? Yeah, you can. You just have to look at it in a different way. You have to stand back from it and see the big shapes and not be concerned that this is all rough. So I appreciate deeply Monk's music in a way that I didn't when I was younger, and it has terrific design, and it has those elements of preparation by expectation and surprise that exactly make you engaged in the drama of the music. So I love it now. And I did then. I worked opposite him for, I don't know, a number of weeks at the 5 spot and kind of ignored him, much to my regret now.
We just have time for one more question.
Yeah.
One last question.
Monk said something to a group of guys he was playing with once. You guys are making the wrong mistakes. It took me forever, and I started applying that to my own life. But what mistakes am I making that are maybe will go in the right way, and what mistakes are the wrong mistakes? But do you have a feel for what he meant when he said that?
Not really. He was a little mysterious. I feel like all my mistakes are wrong. Although a lot of them are kind of unavoidable. I don't know. I'm not sure I can wrap this up with a neat answer for that one. I think he was absolutely a brilliant guy, and in a way that was very different from the kind of brilliance I was used to, but brilliant nonetheless. Just to say, I know you want to close it. We talk about all this jazz music, and we talk about a lot of different pianists and musicians. And one of the great people whose music does these things that I think of as important has kind of got the reputation for being sort of superficial and popular, and in fact, I believe was a great musician, and that's Errol Garner. So, just to give you something to think about form and development and engagement. That's some great music, Errol Garner. Way, way better, for example, than to take somebody else who was bad. Way more creative than Oscar Peterson. Wow. And I don't mean to denigrate Oscar Peterson, but give me the choice. Errol Garner. Okay.
Chuck, I just have one last quick question. So I understand that there was a lot of material that was cut out from this volume.
Yeah.
So when is volume 2 coming
I
out?
have no idea, depends on how much of this sells and it's a lot of work. What's left out is some stuff about working with Barry Harris. It was a great pleasure and some interesting things. And a lot about teaching and how the structure of jazz education and education in general, how I see that. So that's a lot of what they chopped out. It was a problem making the book, giving the book form, and one of the solutions was stop it here, the form is good up to that point. So, that was part of that decision. I didn't have much control over if I wanted the book published, and I did. Okay, thank you all.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. There are books on the cart over there. If you're looking for it, line up over on this side of the room. Get your book signed and paid for downstairs.